Rachel Sklar is the editor-at-large for media news and opinion blog Mediaite.com and founding editor for the Huffington Post's Eat the Press page, for which she was the chief media columnist. She's contributed to the New York Times, The Village Voice, Glamour, New York Magazine, and the Financial Times. She works with media strategy firm Abrams Research, founded by former MSNBC host and legal analyst Dan Abrams. Today we'll talk to Rachel about the news and social media, which continues to be a subject of profound interest in this very politically charged environment. Rachel Sklar, welcome to Give and Take.
Thank you for having me.
So recently the White House has decided to attack Fox News and basically call it not a news organization. Is this a wise strategy? Is it going to basically drive more viewers to Fox?
Well, it depends on what their strategy is. You know, it's funny. One of our editors at Mediaite, Colby Hall, had written a piece where he thought that the White House's war on Fox was actually meant to get them off the topic of healthcare and onto the topic of attacking the White House, and so as a distracting mechanism, made it easier to sort of work public opinion on the back end. So who knows? I think that when you're, no matter what, if you're going to be the administration attacking a news organization then you're always going to run the risk of having people say, well, what about that news organization? What about that news organization? I always think personally in what I do that it's better to focus in on the behavior. And then where there's a pattern, say, there is a pattern and we've seen this, and this, but where there's the exception to that pattern, also point out and say, well, look, like we can't find fault with the way Shep Smith covers this. I think that there is no question that there is bias and there's selectivity in what Fox covers.
Do you think there's bias in the news coverage as well on Fox?
Well, sure. I mean, look at the 9/12 protest, Glenn Beck's 9/12 protest. Fox played that up as a huge story and lambasted other networks for not covering the story enough. So they had a clear vested interest in covering that story, in the protests that were going on, in the point of view that were being expressed. And Jon Stewart on The Daily Show did a neat little piece where he pointed out how Fox had covered protests during the Bush administration and sort of how protests have been dismissed as loons and commies and who knows what else. So there's always going to be that flip in perspective. Does that mean that Fox isn't covering the news? Like, I've seen some fantastic news coverage on Fox. I remember when we had that horrific plane crash where the plane and the helicopter crashed over the Hudson a few months back. Fox was far and away the best live coverage of that with the most expert analysis. But there's point of view that leaks into their political coverage, and when you've got people like Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity who are leading the charge, they're not exactly looking to have the most balanced, nuanced perspective.
Recently, Glenn Beck called President Obama a racist.
Right.
This is really strong language.
It doesn't get much stronger.
Did he cross a line?
He certainly crossed a line for all the people who were outraged about it. He certainly crossed a line for the advertisers who said, we're going to pull our sponsorship of your show, although those advertisers ended up just going elsewhere on Fox, so Fox didn't actually lose anything from it as a network. And it crossed a line based on the ludicrousness of the comment. For Glenn Beck to call Obama, who is of mixed race parentage, a black father and a white mother,
right?
He was raised by his white grandmother. I mean, and based on nothing. I mean, that's a ludicrous statement and meant to inflame.
Do you think there's a double standard? Because with Van Jones, a former advisor on environmental affairs to the White House, he made some incendiary comments, some think, about 9/11 truthers, and he was basically fired. Do you think the White House caved to Fox News there?
Well, I think the unfortunate thing about Van Jones is that he signed a 9/11 truther petition. And, when you have a signature on a document, that's pretty hard to argue with, particularly when the White House has taken such a stance against crazy conspiracy theories. I mean, if you're going to give credence to one crazy conspiracy theory, then you've got to, give credence to Orly Tates. And the White House doesn't want to do that, and thinking people don't want to do that. So that was a very difficult position. But, I will say one part of the Van Jones affair that I found so disturbing was the fact that there seemed to have been some uncertainty as to the validity of getting the signatures on that petition in the first place.
Right.
There were a number of people who it kind of came out had said, well, wait a second, that's not what I thought I signed. And
well,
so
exactly. How do you know that he signed that document? And the thing that I think is really troubling about that is nobody is perfect. If we think that we're going to get people to be involved in public service or politics who are perfect, I don't think anyone can ever meet that test.
No, but you know what? A lot of people who are imperfect and have little blemishes on their past, like, do so without being quote unquote found out. But when you have a news organization making a ton of noise about you and it starts to affect other things, you know, there's a snowball effect. So I think who knows what would have happened. I can't, if the situation had been reversed, I cannot see the Bush administration having, you know, fired their guy. The Bush administration, the length that they like held on to Rummy, held on to Gonzalez, I mean, there was a great deal of loyalty and stick-to-itiveness in the Bush administration, and you did not see that with the Obama administration in the case of Van Jones, who brought so much expertise to his particular job. And the other part of that is
it wasn't a political job in many respects. He was dealing with environmental affairs. It was hardly like he was dealing with a politicized issue like healthcare.
Well, he was also dealing with his whole philosophy about, you know, greening the country and greening the world by starting in underprivileged areas, by bringing solar panels to the ghettos and you know and making and recognizing that green jobs were available to the entire socioeconomic strata. I mean, that's, and when you get to a place of where you are, like through an activist past, through going through sort of alternative countercultural methods, like your past is obviously going to have some radical stuff in it. And I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that, you know, in the montage that Glenn Beck put together about Van Jones, there was a lot of, you know, foreboding music combined with pictures of Van Jones at Yale with his Black Panther t-shirt. I mean, you know what? Who hasn't worn a goofy message t-shirt? You're young, you're figuring it out.